Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to you all to the May committee meeting of the Environment and Infrastructure Committee. I'd like to welcome you all, and can I remind you to use microphones when you're speaking? Can I ask you to look at your tablet devices to make sure they're on silent mode, and remind you that they should all be only used for the purposes of today's business. Can I welcome to his first meeting Mark Butterworth. Mark joins us as Head of Service for Environment and Consumer Services. Mark, could you stand up so everyone can see you? Thank you very much, Mark, and welcome to your first committee meeting. Do we have any apologies or substitutions for today's meeting?
Councillor, we have apologies for Councillor Lewis Simpson, who is being substituted by Councillor Ahern.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest in respect of the business on today's agenda? Okay, I'll be declaring an interest in the paper relating to Tayside contracts. The first item of business is the minutes from the last meeting. Can I have the committee's approval to sign the minute book, please? Thank you. Okay, our first item of business is the Business Management and Improvement Plan for 2019-20. I'm going to ask Barbara Renton to introduce this report.
Thank you, Convener. I have great pleasure in introducing the first completely combined Business Management Improvement Plan and Annual Performance Report for Housing and Environment this afternoon, although clearly I can only refer to the elements linked to this committee's remit. The report continues to reflect the impressive work that the service does across Perth and Kinross. The range of activity across the teams who deliver services under the remit of this committee is very broad and wide-reaching, and so many are of the very high quality, reflecting the hard work and commitment of all the teams involved. This makes it very difficult to pick out any specific highlights without fear of offending those who don't get mentioned. However, I would like to point out some key areas. After many months of discussion and negotiations, the heads of terms for the Tay Cities deal were agreed in November last year. Work is now ongoing on this, with almost 50% of the available funding coming to projects within the Perth and Kinross area, and the outline business cases for all of these projects have been submitted in draft form to both governments. Over the course of the last year, through various employability projects, we have assisted 435 people back into work. And as well as that, we've brought a further 145 properties back into use in that year as well, helping to support the local economy, which makes a total of 680 since 2014-15 when we began the project. A remarkable achievement, but made even more impressive by the fact that other local authorities continue to follow our lead in this area. Glasgow, for example, have brought back 120 fewer properties within the same time period. The A85 was completed and opened in the period covering the report and is bringing the anticipated benefits to the areas as a result, as well as winning an award for community benefits. Our approach to working with communities continues to develop, and we will use the very good practice from those parts of the service who do outstanding work, such as our Community Green Space team, to support our new service-wide approach to engagement and consultation, which was approved at SPNR at the last meeting. We continue to deliver other high-quality capital projects, such as the Creative Exchange, St Paul's and the City Hall, as well as maintaining our other property assets. The service also continues with our own commitment to growing our own staff, 16 modern apprentices, 2 horticultural trainees and 5 graduate trainees across a variety of disciplines across the whole of the service, which brings in new blood and youth, which is much necessary as well. We don't always get it right, but it's genuinely not for the want of trying. There is clearly more to be done across the whole service, but we are continuing to focus on economic development, continue to deliver the priorities agreed by you as elected members in support of the corporate objectives, as well as continuing to build the culture and ethos of what is still a relatively new service. However, I have every confidence that the teams will continue to deliver the improvement agenda set out in the report. We are happy to answer any questions.
Can I invite any questions from the floor relating to environment and infrastructure matters, please? First off, Councillor McCall, followed by Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, I believe I have one for the right committee. There's many outstanding points in this report, but I note on page 28 that the Rural Micro Enterprise Fund was oversubscribed. It's highlighting the need for a helping hand for local entrepreneur businesses, and that 36 applications have been approved. Can I ask if where we are with the current situation of the fund, and what kind of businesses have applied, what was the funding used for, and is it now fully allocated, or are there still applications being processed? A bit of a three-parter there, I'm sorry, but I just to get a little bit more information on that fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. I believe David will answer that.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Yes, the fund is almost fully subscribed. There's about 10,000 still to be allocated, but there are 5 applications still being assessed at the moment. So I think pretty much that the fund is now fully subscribed. A huge range of businesses taking up this opportunity. Just looking at the list, I mean, they kind of reflect the rural economy. So the vast majority will be in kind of tourism, culture, with some in food and drink, and it's pretty much all to purchase equipment, additional bits of kit to help that business develop would be the principal use.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, followed by Councillor Dugan.
Thank you. First of all, Convener, can I briefly make reference to page 25 and congratulate the playgroup at St Fillan's and the work they've done with their grand opening 2 weeks on Saturday, and also the fantastic work done at my friends in McCrosty Park in Crieff with their all-ability play area. Specifically, the other question I want to ask relates to hotels and hotel provision in Perth. So I think it is such an important issue. Page 14, it sets it out as securing new hotel accommodation per city centre is a key priority. The same applies on page 29. And then finally on page 48, again, right up the list, strategic objective, engage with investors to support the investment and delivery of an additional hotel capacity within Perth City and delivery timescale of March 2020. Can I ask, I think it would be Mr. Littlejohn, how this is going to achieve and what progress has been made so far?
Thank you for the question. We did some work with hotel experts that concluded there's still additional capacity in Perth for something like 100 and 125 additional bedrooms. And that's what we're kind of proposing to secure. The reason that's important is so that we can encourage more people to spend more time here and particularly attract more conference business. It's the ability to offer a largest number of rooms to a particular conference organiser. We're aware that we're losing some conferences because of that lack of consistent supply of the volumes that a conference organiser or a business tourism organisation would want. So that's the kind of rationale for the piece of work that we did that conclude there is indeed demand. I can't really talk too much about the specific discussions because these are obviously commercially confidential, but we're looking at a number of options for conversion of existing buildings and or new build on sites that are in and around the city centre. I think it's fair to say there is significant interest from the hotel industry, from the branded hotels in having a presence in Perth. So I'm hopeful it's a matter of when, not if we can get the right combination of operator, funding and site all together for them.
Very brief supplementary. You've largely answered what I was going to ask, but from what you said and taking into account commercial and confidential considerations, you actually think March 2020, effectively a year from now, is probably a deliverable date, as it does matter, not just for Perth City, but for areas around attracting that conference business?
I think the answer to the question very much depends what the solution will ultimately be. If it's starting from a standing start to build a brand new hotel, I think March 2020, we would at least have the principles agreed, the developer in partnership with us, and a hotel operator identified. If it's a light touch conversion of an existing hotel or an existing building, then it's possible the rooms might be available by that stage. But I think realistically we'll have the kind of basis of a project by March next year, not the actual finished building itself.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Next is Councillor Dugan, followed by Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if I might initially intrude with a supplementary to Mr Littlejohn, following on from Councillor Donaldson's inquiry, and that is the interest that national brands are having in the Perth area. Would Mr Littlejohn characterise that as a relatively recent development, because it sounds a lot more positive than the conversations we were having back in the early days of the Perth City Development Board, and I'd be very happy to know if that is a new dynamic that's in play.
Let's ask and see.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Dugan. Yes, and it's not serendipity. It's actually by the kind of efforts we've put to go out and seek these brands. We've participated in a hotel event in London, for example, where we, with Scottish Development International, went down to Scotland House and actually held an evening reception and invited hotel operators and developers to come and hear about the Perth proposition. So it's about active marketing and actually selling and talking up the great offer that we have here. We have kind of piqued the interest of those operators in a way which, unless we go out there and do that, Perth is perhaps not the first port of call for these brands.
Excellent, thank you. Very grateful for those efforts, Convener. I think it's really important that we get some traction with that in moving Perth forward. Consistent with that point, I refer to page 52 in the report, which shows the very strong performance of Perth City Centre in terms of vacant retail units. And one of the things I struggle with as a city councillor is the reality of vacant units in Perth City Centre and the perception of empty units in Perth City Centre. And I think sometimes when people are concerned about the economic vibrancy of our city centre, they let rhetoric get ahead of fact. And I wonder if there's something we could do, as Mr Littlejohn has just pointed out in terms of hotels, about talking up the successes of Perth City Centre and showcasing that two crucial things: how far ahead of the rest of Scotland we are in terms of this measure, and the fact that zero is never the target when it comes to vacant units. There is always an element of churn in this measure, and you never get to zero, and probably nor would you wish to. So how do we get that message out, Convener, about the success that we've enjoyed in that respect?
I think we allocated some money in the last budget to the City Centre Task Force, as I'm sure you're aware, because I think you sit on that committee, if my memory serves me correctly, so I think that will make a big difference. But we have experts in the room, and I agree with the sentiment of what you said, so perhaps Mr Littlejohn might speak.
And just to be clear, Convener, I'm not looking for extra action in this respect. It's about communication. It's about understanding of people in Perth and District, about what we've actually got in Perth.
I agree with you entirely, Councillor Dugan. Anything you'd like to add to that, David?
I'll say a few words and then perhaps pass to John for more of the detail. You're absolutely right. Just because it's there doesn't mean that people will use it. And I think we need to kind of, it's a longer term consistent approach to attracting local people as much as anything else, and visitors into the city centre. The events programme has done that in large measure, but by definition it's always going to be ad hoc. It's more about what we can do on a daily, a weekly basis to animate the city centre, to use the spaces in the city centre more creatively for a variety of uses that will kind of, again, be of interest to people and allow them to dwell longer. The evidence is really clear. The longer the more you increase the dwell time, there's a significant increase in the likelihood of additional expenditure. So that's the kind of generality of the approach that we're trying to take. John can maybe say a few more words.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Councillor Dugan. We do try and distribute the information as widely as possible through working with the Perth Traders Association. We try and encourage businesses to cross-sell There are obviously perception issues out there with the public. That's about communications, as you rightly say, with the press. We constantly reinforce where our performance is at. And we're also looking, as with the kind of hotel propositions, to engage with the market around our success, and have done work which some of you will have seen in terms of the previous study done by the retail group. So there's a body of work in preparation to actually promote all of that more extensively to the marketplace as well. But we're using all the channels that we can, including traditional media, working with businesses and social media as well, to put the information out there, so we can just keep on hammering the message home.
Thank you. Councillor Parrott, followed by Councillor
Sorry,
Bailey.
Convener, I had one more, if that was okay.
Of course, Councillor Deegan, carry on.
It's on page 41. Final question is the caution that's provided in the top measure, where we have a red score for the consequences of a no-deal Brexit and the attendant impact that will have on house building, business expansion and skilled staff. What, if
Councillor
any...
Dugan, I'm sorry, I will have to stop you there. I think we all remember the discussion we had from Lisa Simpson regarding the fact we're in a pre-election period for the European election. So I'm not taking any discussions on Brexit, I'm afraid. I've had legal advice from Lisa Simpson again this morning just to confirm that, so I'm sorry that's not a conversation we can have today.
Well, okay, Convener, I'll act on your instruction. Out of respect for you in the chair, it is a disappointment, though, nevertheless, without mentioning any of the things that we're not now allowed to mention, that we've got an issue on the paper which we're not allowed to discuss. That should have been taken out of pre-agenda if we can't discuss it.
It's a very small part of a very large paper, and it's something I've clarified, as I said, with Lisa Simpson this morning, and it isn't for discussion today. And I understand you're not happy with that, but and I apologise, but I'm afraid that's the way it is.
That's your ruling.
Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. I'm on page 52, and I'm glad to note that our official unemployment rate remains very low, functionally essentially zero. However, given the nature of our population, where the working age population is a lower percentage of the total population than it has been, we have an ageing demographic. I wonder whether we might look into measuring the number of vacancies that we have unfilled in the economy as a percentage of the total workforce. We have almost full employment, but it concerns me that actually what might be holding us back is that we cannot fill vacancies. And I would be interested to see a figure there of, if you like, vacancies in the economy unfilled, and I'm wondering whether we do actually have any data on that. Thank you.
David, I believe you can help us with this one again. Thank you.
Oh, well, vacancy tracking is fairly difficult. The obvious source is Job Centre Plus, the Job Centre. But only about a third of all vacancies are promoted through that source. We have some additional sources and jobs that are advertised in our own hub, but the vast majority of vacancies are filled by businesses through family, friends, connections, local advertisements. So it's quite tricky to get an accurate picture of the number of unfilled vacancies. But I think we can look at that, and it's something I think we could try and provide for you. Whether or not it's appropriate to feature in the BEAM, it might be a separate matter, because these are indicators that we can directly influence, and we're not directly influencing how vacancies are filled or able to track those that are proving difficult to fill, unless that employer comes to us and specifically asks for help.
If I may, Convener, thank you for that, and I'm grateful that you'll look into what is a difficult area. But I do think actually that there is evidence now that shortage of labour is actually a problem in certain sectors, and I think it's something that we should look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parrott. Councillor Bailey, followed by Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Convener. I've got two questions on different parts of the paper, so should I do them separately in that case? Yeah, okay. The first one is right down at the bottom of page 34. We're reporting there the percentage of employees paid the living wage. First of all, is that for the whole Perth and Kinross economy, or is it just for council employees, that figure?
David?
Sorry, you're referring to the bottom of the table on page 52.
Page 30.
Oh.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah.
I'll just need to scroll back to see what the actual...
I think Barbara's going to answer the...
No, I'm going to clarify. We picked up, you know, sort of when we were reading this again yesterday, that, you know, sort of was a very slight mistake in that, and it should be the percentage of employees not paid the living wage. My apologies, I meant to say that in the introductory comments. So that should read not paid the living
Okay.
wage.
Should it additionally? Is it just for Perth and Kinross Council employees, or is it across the piece, that figure?
It's all employees. That's a national statistic.
Okay, thank you. Then my other question, if I may, is about page 48 in the document pack. Sorry to switch page numbering systems. Page 48 there, under supporting people to live independent, healthy and active lives. We've got 3 items there around air quality action plans, climate change strategy and reducing waste. None of those 3 have a target delivery timescale on them, and I find that concerning given all this move about climate emergency, etc. Can I get the convener's assurance that there's work underway to attach dates to those, please, in light of that? Thank you.
David, can you reassure me so I can reassure Councillor Bailey? Oh.
I think the 3 you're referring to are probably more related with the responsibility of our kind of environmental and criminal affairs colleagues. But they are ongoing actions, and a lot of the air quality measures are ongoing. But I think it's how we actually report the changes in them. So I'd need to give some consideration with some colleagues in how we address that.
I think Barbara's going to answer you, Councillor Bailey.
Yes, you know, sort of they are ongoing actions, and that's why some of it is difficult, you know, sort of to put particular dates on. You know, sort of we are working through, you know, sort of the CREEF Air Quality Action Plan with an intention to bring back a report on that to the next committee following the recess. We have an internal officer-led, you know, sort of climate change group. They are working currently on a climate change strategy, working across all services to make sure that we get, you know, sort of, and we will be bringing that forward in due course for consultation with elected members as well. And we will continue, obviously, in terms of our approach to reduce, reuse and recycle materials as well.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. And I think the last question, as no one else has indicated they want to speak, is Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Convener. Convener, relating specifically to Perth and Kinross, I was wondering if the officers would like to tell us what they think the biggest risks to an economic downturn, a reduction in house building and business expansion and investment would be that faces Perth and Kinross.
David, could you answer that?
Macroeconomic factors, I think, would be the answer.
Would that relate to the leaving the EU with a no deal?
That's a macroeconomic factor amongst others. Yeah.
Councillor Ling, I think
Okay,
you'll get the
thank
opportunity
you.
to discuss anything relating to the EU when it comes to scrutiny, because I think we'll be beyond the pre-election period by then, and scrutiny would be a good place for you to have a conversation about that. And I am sorry that we can't discuss it today, I really am, but I have to go with the legal advice I've been given. I'm sure you understand that.
Accept your role as convener and the point you make. The legal advice we had was somewhat different, but that's fine. We'll take that with the legal team. My other question, as that one was a little bit unprepared, is on page 52. I'm looking at the Perth City Centre footfall numbers from 2016, and I know that it's only a part year, 2018-19, but we're looking at it's the percentage above the national footfall level. I was wondering, hopefully we're not falling behind a little bit. It's the other cities, are they improving their offer, or can we have the reasons behind that, please?
Thanks, Councillor Ling. Yes, I spotted this too. I can't comment on other cities, but perhaps David will be able to, or sorry, John will be able to give us some reassurance on that. But I think we can all accept that city centres are suffering from footfall down the way, for want of a better word.
Yeah, but sorry, convener, this is relating to other ones. So if other cities are going down, and we're going down, that's fine. But ours is going down in a steeper incline.
I agree,
accordance with
Councillor
those
Ling, and
facts.
I'm hoping that John will be able to give us that information, because I certainly don't have it.
A positive figure indicates that we are performing better than national averages. So whilst there's still a decline in footfall, as with other places, we are still performing above national average. So a positive percentage is good. A negative percentage would show that we're actually beginning to fall behind. So, I mean, it's a positive figure.
I fully appreciate it's a positive figure, but it's half as positive as it was 2 years ago. That's the point I'm making. I was wondering if there was reasons behind that.
I think, can I just interrupt?
David
Oh,
might have that.
Well, I was just going to give you I've got the updated figure just so we're clear that the end of year, the March, February, the March 19 figure is 5.9%. So it's gone up from the 1.9 that was there in February. So it's a slightly better performance against the national average compared with last year. But I think the point still stands. There is overall a trend in declining footfall in city centres, so it's how we can buck that trend as much as possible. But there is only so much that we will be able to do if there is a national trend in one direction.
thank you, Councillor Ling, and Councillor Barnacle has a question for someone.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, from my scanning of the paper, I can't actually pick out one of the concerns I have, which is about littering generally, fly tipping in particular. But I did feel that we used to have campaigns about the environment and, you know, keeping Scotland tidy and all this, and it seems to have lapsed. There are one or two campaigns ongoing, but I feel that we should be doing more in having a plan within Person Kinross about this, and I don't see anything in this paper regarding that. Perhaps it's in the general strategy, but I'd just like to see some clarity on that if possible.
I'm wondering if Bruce might be able to help us with that one. Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Councillor Barnacle. The information in relation to litter and fly tipping is contained within the waste management plan. How we've been taking that forward is really jumping on the back of national campaigns that are being run by organisations such as Keep Scotland Beautiful and Zero Waste Scotland, and where there's a relevant national campaign that has local significance, we'll usually use the resources at our disposal at that point in time and use those national campaigns to our benefit.
Thank you, Councillor Barnacle. This report before us today is the Business Management and Improvement Plan and the Annual Performance Report for Housing and Environment. The report highlights the many successes over 2018-19 for the service and identifies key actions for this year and beyond. I'd like to pass my thanks to all of the staff who've worked so hard over the last year and continue to do so to provide the best service they can with the resources that are available. Do I have a seconder for this paper? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Are there any comments on this paper? Councillor McCall.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I was just noticing in the focus on page 36 or page 18, depending on which one you're looking at, that with climate change so prevalent in our minds at the moment, it's so important that we look at innovative and radical advances in scientific ways to develop a new climate change strategy. And I applaud the fact that this is the main focus moving forward as number one on that page. So I applaud that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. I think Councillor Robertson was next, followed by Councillor Duff.
Yes, there's mention, convener, on page 33 about the introduction of vehicle-activated signs, and I think this is an amazing forward step in the road safety and the reduction of speed in many areas. Every community council I go to now that have had vehicle-activated signs installed locally sing their praises. And it gives actually people an indication clearly when you see cars or vehicles going through them, you can see what speed they're going, and you know if you can identify if there is an issue with speeding traffic or not. So, and by and large, our road safety team have actually worked with communities and actually installed those VASs exactly where people want them put. So I think it's a great example of us as a council working actually with communities to actually make them safer. And I know there's not a lot of mention of this in this report, but I think it's something we should highlight. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Robertson. Chick, could you maybe take that back to your team?
Absolutely,
And last
thank
up,
you.
John Duff.
Thank you.
Councillor Duff, I apologise.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. I'm pleased to see that the increase in the economic impact of events supported by the Council has increased last year over the previous year. Our Winter Festival is a major highlight in the Scottish Events calendar, with the Christmas light switch on alone generating £1.96 million of additional expenditure, helping us to exceed our £10 million target by £1.6 million last year, and I thought that was an excellent improvement. I also just wanted to echo Councillor Robertson's comments about the very effective vehicle-activated signs. I know that these have been welcomed by communities, certainly across Highland Perthshire, and I know that more are planned and more are being requested, and as I say, I find them very effective in doing what they can to slow speed in Highland Perthshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. And I'll now hand over to Vice Convener. Oh, sorry, Councillor Dugan, I missed you.
No, sorry, it's probably my fault, Convener. It's just simply to very quickly record my appreciation for the very positive measures which are set out within the report, many of which feature the progress that the Council has made by officers on some very long-standing economic priorities of Perth and Kinross Council. Times are harder than they've ever been before, yet progress still remains being made, and we should all be very grateful to officers for their continued diligence in this respect.
I agree with you entirely, Councillor Dugan. Thank you for that. Councillor Lane.
I also think it's an excellent report, and it continues to show the good work of our officers and the people who actually carry out the work further down the line. My only concern is that this is all knocked off course by any outside macroeconomic activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. As there would appear to be no further comments, we'll move on to the next paper. Councillor Baird.
Thank you very much. Now we have the Roads Maintenance Partnership Agreement before us, and I think we're all aware there was a short life member officer working group, which I think it's been one of the very long member officer working group. So I will ask Barbara Renton to introduce this report.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Convener. Oh, let's switch on. Before I begin, we noticed a very small error in the structure chart, so it has no impact on the contents of the report before you today, but we thought it would be worthwhile, to offer you a revised one. The first person to spot the difference, apart from Councillor Parrott, wins a prize. It's the middle box in terms of the project manager, Brian Angus. There was a change to his title that hadn't been reflected in the structure that you had before you. The report today outlines a brief history of the Roads Maintenance Partnership and the Council's ongoing relationship with Tayside Contracts. It also outlines the national approach as outlined by the Counts Commission in two separate reports in 2011 and 2012 in relation to maintaining Scotland's roads. These both recommended considering how roads were managed and maintained, specifically in terms of delivery models and collaborative working. The former Tayside Region Councils and Tayside Contracts have consistently been recognised by Audit Scotland as a model of that collaborative approach that they were expecting to see. The introduction of the partnership in 2012 enabled efficiencies to be made and supervisors' posts to be deleted from the establishment as a result, and therefore cost savings as well. It also facilitated a more reactive response service and a proactive one as well, and the joint management of providing the service with quarterly reporting to an established board overseeing governance and service delivery. As a result of issues raised by some elected members, as the Vice Convener has referred to, about the effectiveness of the partnership, a member officer working group considered the way the Council provided the service in comparison to 5 alternative delivery models in place elsewhere in Scotland. After due consideration, it was agreed that the current partnering agreement continues to be the best model at this time to serve the Council's needs, particularly given the reactive requirements in terms of severe weather. Today's report seeks approval to enter a formal partnering agreement with Tayside Contracts until the 31st of March 2023, and by that agreement will ensure appropriate governance and transparency and accountability under the scrutiny of a partnership board. The most significant change, as recommended by the Member Officer Working Group, is that the Partnership Manager will be a member of Perth and Kinross Council staff, currently the post held by our own Stuart Diall, who will be able to answer any questions this afternoon on the report.
Are there any questions on this report? Councillor Lane.
It's just about the terminology in the report. I'm a bit concerned when we had community safety in today, we're talking about hit squads in the afternoon.
Note your comments. Was that a question, actually?
On it. I didn't understand it yet.
You can make your comments after, if you don't mind. Thank you. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm happy with the partnership approach and we're continuing with that. I'm particularly happy to note on page 7 or page 75, depending on how you look, that we have a goal to get things right first time, every time. I think that's a goal that we should be looking to apply across everything that we do. So can I ask what process is in place to monitor the completed works to ensure that we can indeed get it right first time, every time?
Stuart, can you answer that question?
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Our area supervisors now directly manage the Tayside contracts, surface and crews, or repair squads as we refer to them. They'll issue the works order to the squads directly, they'll monitor their work, and they'll sign off the work at the end of the day. So we'd have a direct input to monitoring the quality of the work. Obviously, if we're doing repairs in inclement weather or in a period where we can't get sufficient time to access the network, there may be times where we have to go back and do rework, but our aim is to get first time every time.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Convener. I'm pleased that this has come forward, and I'm delighted that we're going to go into a formal agreement, because I think what the system I've got now actually does work, and I'm very pleased with the service that we get, well, I get as a councillor from the Roads Network team. The introduction of hit squads, I'm quite sure it's not been that long since hit squads have been introduced, and it was something we'd asked for, and it seems to me as if things do get sorted an awful lot quicker, and I wonder if Mr. Dahl could actually say just how he uses hit squads, and has it made a difference to the way we get things sorted out?
Stuart?
Thanks, Councillor Robertson. Yes, we've had repair crews for quite a number of years, but the change that we've made is that they're now directly under the control of one person. Before, they used to get pulled from pillar to post. So for your own particular area, Gary McConnell looks after the repair squad that's in the Kinrossshire area, and he's got direct control of them. So if he gets a request from a member of the public, unelected member, he's out in the network every day. He can inspect it very quickly, and he can then call on that squad directly because he knows their workload, he knows where they are, he knows what they're doing, he knows what they've got on the back of the wagon that particular day, and so they can give you that reactive and responsive service. And that's a change we made to it to make it that more reactive.
And I just wanted to make, this is a comment rather than a question, I just wanted to say that I'm really pleased the way that people like Gary McConnell actually speak to the public and work with people who are getting work done round about their pavements and streets. And it does actually prevent an awful lot of problems occurring. So it's really, really good the way that you work with the community to make things better for everyone. Thanks.
No further questions on this report? No, don't think anybody was just asked a question. Well, I'm happy to move this report. Following on from the members' officers groups working on the Road Maintenance Partnership, today's report seeks approval to enter a formal partnering agreement with Tayside Contracts until the 31st of March 2023. The agreement will ensure appropriate governance, transparency and accountability under the scrutiny of the Partnership Board. The paper also outlines that a review will be undertaken of the Council's procurement approach to roads maintenance projects, and that this will be brought back to a committee for approval then. Do I have a seconder for this report?
Happy to second, Vice
Councillor
Convener.
Duff. Thank you. Are there any comments on this report? Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I'd like to thank the Member Officer Working Group for bringing, and Barbara, bringing the paper here and including as the Convener Scrutiny point 3 on the recommendations, that scrutiny will have the chance to meet the Managing Director of Tayside Contracts annually, and that will give us all a wider knowledge of what they're doing. So thanks for including that in the recommendations.
Thank you for the comment. Councillor Dugan.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. And just before I go any further, if that was a short life working group, it's instructive to never ever volunteer for a long life working group. But I'm nevertheless very grateful to the then convener, Councillor Stewart, who, after quite a few discussions with me, elected to engage with officers and request that this takes part following various concerns from across the chamber about the partnership and its, the way in which it was constituted and administered, which is a very different, it was always recognised, it's very different situation and concern from that which we find on the ground operationally. And I think most councillors are very understanding of the challenges that faces this particular element of our service, and that by and large that we get a very, very good service from our road service and their colleagues in Tayside Contracts. I think what's most important to come out of this is that we now, in my view and in the view of those who were also on the member officer working group, is that we have a structure that we can have confidence in and that we can ratify and that we can rely upon going forward, and crucially, quite apart from the substantive Perth and Kinross position of partnership manager, we will also have an opportunity, which has been absent for too long, to properly and formally scrutinise the functioning of the construction side of Tayside, well, every side of Tayside Contracts, I believe, at scrutiny. And I think that will serve Tayside Contracts very well, every bit as much as it will serve Perth and Kinross councillors and their understanding of the very valuable and surprisingly varied, when you get into it, service that Tayside Contracts provide to residents of Perth and Kinross Council, very much to our benefit, and we should be grateful for that, and this is a very positive step forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dugan, for these very kind words. I'm sure that the team will appreciate them very much, because we all do value the work that they all do. And there is more than one supervisor I must mention. Any other comments? Happy to agree the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener. That takes us on to paper number 6 in your report. This report details the Cycling, Walking and Safer Streets projects implemented in 2018-19. And I will ask Chick Haggart to introduce the report. Chick, please.
Thank you, Convener. The Cycling, Walking and Safer Streets title relates to the grant allocation which is made on an annual basis from the Scottish Government to all Scottish local authorities. As a result of that, we produce this report annually following the award of the grant, and it provides information on how we spent last year's allocation, what we intend using this year's allocation for, and schemes that we are proposing for 2 years from now. One of the conditions of the grant allocation is that a minimum of 36% of the funding is targeted towards cycling, and I'm pleased to confirm that last year we spent approximately 45% of the funding on cycling. That's important because clearly the requirement for the grant on an annual basis is that we meet those conditions, and I'm pleased that we've done that year on year for what is quite a number of years now. This welcome funding, coupled with other sources of funding, supports our work in improving conditions on the public road network for our more sustainable transport modes, such as cycling and walking, and it's helped us improve conditions for all our road users. Thank you.
Thank you, Chick. Are there any questions on this report? Councillor McCall, followed by Councillor Robertson.
Thank you again, Convener. I thank you for the details on the report, and I noticed that the description for minor measures to improve the centre of, insert town here, for pedestrians with visual and mobility impairment, it's mentioned quite a few times. I was just wondering if I could get an example of what that means.
Absolutely, Councillor McCall. What that has been is it's actually a result of a partnership approach which we've undertaken with Living Streets, which is interested in improving conditions for vulnerable road users, and particularly the Centre for Inclusive Living, Perth and Kinross. We've worked in partnership with these groups to identify the challenges faced principally by disabled people in moving around our towns and cities. What we've been able to identify as a result of those partnerships is areas where dropped curbs are perhaps lacking or pedestrian crossings are lacking, and what we're doing is we're identifying those points that are most in need of treatment. Following on from that, we implement whatever measures are necessary so that a disabled person can make his or her way from their home to perhaps to the shops, to leisure activities, to a church, whatever it may be, but their desire lines are met, whereas previously they might have had to undertake a significant detour. So they're in each individual case, they're often very minor measures, but they make a huge difference to people's lives, and it's really very gratifying. Thank you.
If I may, convener, that's very reassuring, and thank you very much for that. But I notice, and I'm going to get a little bit parochial here, but with the town centre in Crieff, now obviously we have the A85 going straight through the middle of Crieff, which is the main town centre, of which we are restricted on what we can do. So with 14,000 being spent, I'm just wondering if you could give me an idea of how that's worked. I know it's very specific to my ward, but I really would like to have a bit more of an idea of how we get round that particular issue, and because you're not really putting people with disabled or visibility issues through the centre of the town. So could you give me a little bit more on that, please?
Thank you again. I can, although I can't give you all the details of where all the money has been spent specifically, but when I get back to the office I can certainly furnish you with that. Interestingly, however, the point you make is extremely valid, and as recently as this week I've been in touch with colleagues in Transport Scotland to try to set up a meeting with Transport Scotland, with BEAR and ourselves, with the business community in Crieff to identify some of those additional measures that are required on the trunk road, and hopefully we'll get something positive from that. They haven't responded as yet, but it's, beg your pardon, it was actually last week, but the point is valid.
Would it be possible then, convener, just if we could get an update on how that goes? Maybe the ward councillors would be interested in how that progresses, if that's possible.
Without a doubt, that would,
That'd
yes,
be fine.
certainly.
In that case, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Next up is Councillor Robertson, followed by Councillor Barnacle. Okay, in that case we move straight to Councillor Barnacle.
Yeah, thanks, convener. On page 93 and also page 96, Plan 10, which is Kinross Town Centre. Can I just ask whether these measures bear any relationship to the separate issue of the Kinross Town Centre Shared Space Regeneration Scheme? Because that's actually the centre of Kinross, not the area you're talking about, and that doesn't seem to feature at all. Is that a separate pot of money, nothing to do with this?
Chick, can you answer that?
Thank you, Councillor Barnacle. This does not relate to the shared space scheme in Kinross Town Centre. These relate to measures across the whole of the town centre. It may or may not include that area, but not specifically. This is for the existing road network. But relating to the town centre shared space scheme, we have colleagues within our service who are currently looking at undertaking a review of that whole scheme. I'm not leading on that, although I and my team will be involved. But when that review is being undertaken, the local elected members, of course, will be involved, and we'll see how that goes. But it is a separate issue to the measures identified in here, yes.
Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, convener. I note that the Shore Road project was delayed from 1819, and I see that it's included in the projects for 1920. However, I'm just slightly confused at the diagram. Does the scope of the project at diagram 2, I think it is, Appendix 4, Plan 2, is the scope of the project that's in for this year just the type of hatching that's on both sides of Shore Road running onto Tay Street by the bridge? Or does the scope of the project this year include the different sort of hatching that's along Marshall Place?
Thank you, Councillor Parrott. The scheme that is going ahead this year includes all the hatched areas on the plan. Last year it was only going to be on Shore Road itself, but there are improvements to the Marshall Place footways also this year. Because we were delaying it, we were able to source additional funding and do a bigger project this year.
So if I both what was described as phase 1 and phase 2 for Shore Road, that was both part of the delayed project?
That's correct,
Thank
yes.
you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Convener. I have two questions. First of all, on 2.5, the Perth Cycle Action Plan, and at our last meeting, we had total and utter agreement, almost indeed complete consensus, and that's not something we always have on this council. But the deadline date for the application was 26th of April. Could I just quickly ask, when do we hope to hear back on that, whether the application, and hopefully it is, successful from Sustrans?
I think there's a presentation in June the 6th, is it?
Yeah, so we have to make a presentation in June to Sustrans, and we anticipate hearing back from them in early July.
You had a second question, I think,
Yeah,
Councillor
second
Donaldson?
question
Carry on,
is, may I just also thank Mr Haggart for his response to Councillor McCall's question about the town centre of Crieff. What I do want, and Bear Scotland, could I ask though on the allocations for 2019-2021, one project that isn't included at all and really does matter to the people of Crieff and Comrie is the core path from Comrie to Crieff. And in particular, that's not just a footpath, it's also a cycle path, and it's one that takes cyclists off that very busy stretch of the A85. So there's real issues of road safety here. Could I just ask for an update on that and why there's not here an allocation, or does it come under a separate budget?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. It does indeed come under separate funding. This grant allocation is specifically for on-road works. So this is specifically about improving the public road network, not relating to rural paths or core paths or anything like that. I don't know the latest situation with regard to it, but I can find out for you, certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Yes, that, the Crieff Comrie Path project is a project that sits with my team in Community Green Space. I'm pleased to say that we've nearly got the designs finished from the engineers who've been working on the project, looking at bridges, surfacing, levels, flooding, all those sorts of issues. And once we get those final designs, which should be in the next couple of weeks, we will then be able to go and negotiate with the landowners, because the whole section of the route is owned privately. So we will have to go and negotiate with them. That'll probably take 3 to 4 months negotiating with them, and hopefully we can reach an agreement with them. If not, we have the backstop of a path order that was previously approved at committee, that we can take the route forward through that process.
Can I just say thank you for that response, and at last progress it takes time, but is being made, and I'm pleased about that.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Ahern, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Convener. It's just with regards to the Perth City Centre allocation on page 95, and I notice on the plan it includes all the area around the City Hall. And I'm just wondering if work's actually going to take place with regards to changing the paving around the City Hall, or that's going to wait until that's completed.
Councillor Hearn, this again relates to works that are ongoing now. So any improvements that are required to be undertaken in order to make facilities better for access for principally disabled people will be going ahead. It doesn't relate to the overall City Hall project, which I understand is probably likely to start later this year. Looking to my colleagues here, I'm told October of this year that's going to start, but that again will be separate to anything in here. And may I apologise to Councillor Donaldson for calling him Councillor Robertson. My apologies.
My question was, are we going to be doing work that's going to be ripped up in terms of the work that's going around? So are we going to be using money to put in works that are going to be taken up once that work around the City Hall starts?
No, absolutely not. But it does include the area, because there may be locations on the periphery that aren't going to be affected by the City Hall works that may need to be improved at the moment. But no, we will certainly endeavour not to have anything done which proves to be abortive.
Thank you, Councillor Ahern. And Councillor Jarvis, I don't see any other requests for questions, so we'll call this the last one.
Thank you. My question is Castlebrae Hunting Tower. It's a road that's caused a lot of contention because of lack of footpaths. So I'm delighted to see that we're phase 3 is now imminent. Could I ask though what the time scale is for that work to be done?
I'm sorry, Councillor Jarvis, I don't have that information to hand, but when I get back to the office, I'll find out and let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for the questions. This report highlights the cycling, walking and safer streets related work which was undertaken in last financial year. It identifies proposed projects for this financial year and lists potential schemes for financial year 2020 to 21. It also highlights other funding sources such as Sustrans and TACTRAN, which support various schemes. The projects involved all support the more vulnerable road user groups such as pedestrians, cyclists, disabled people, and the measures include lowering of curbs to assist wheelchair users and those with buggies or prams to cross, footway links to assist pedestrians, and shared use paths to promote walking and cycling. Do I have a seconder for this? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Are there any comments on this? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Convener. I think this is an excellent report, and it sends out the message that Perth and Kinross is a cycling and pedestrian-friendly area, and that we take it very seriously. And there's small amounts of money allocated here and large amounts of money allocated here. And I think it makes a big difference to people's lives if children and all people with all abilities can actually access their town centres and access the places they want to go to safely without having to worry about heavy traffic. And in the long term, I totally agree with my the person with the same name as me, Councillor Donaldson, that we link communities together, not just because of people's health and well-being, but it's a tremendous economic driver for people to be able to cycle safely from places like Auchterarder to Crieff and then onwards to Loch Earn. So I think this report and the way it's done and the way it's spread out throughout Perth and Kinross says everything we need to say about Perth and Kinross. We are a pedestrian and cycling friendly area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson would be proud of you. Are there any other comments? Are there any other comments? Are we happy to agree this report? Thank you.
Okay. Now we come to the Community Environment Challenge Fund update. I mean, I think this is one of the funds that can benefit all communities. So I will invite Bruce Reekie to introduce this report.
Thank you, Vice Convener. The Community Environment Challenge Fund allows communities to bid for environmental improvement funding. The fund is aimed at community groups and delivering projects which make a significant difference to the local environment and will be widely supported within the communities that they serve. Up to £100,000 of funding has been made available annually since 2011-2012. Last year, this committee also approved further changes to enable the allocation of funding to be available to assist communities to leverage funding from the Scottish Landfill Communities Fund. And as you can see in the report, 5 projects have taken advantage of that and leveraged funding to a total of over £160,000. We also made changes to expand the applications to include sports pitches and sport ground pavilion improvements as well. And already the fund has provided funding for Kettins Parish Hall Phase 1 project to actually improve the leisure facilities at Lindsay Park in Kettins. The Community Environment Challenge Fund projects must be completed within 2 years, using at least 50% match funding, and this can include fundraising from in-kind support from the actual communities themselves. It's also the responsibility of the communities to work up a long-term maintenance plan for the environmental improvements that they put in place. And within the last year, we funded 7 new projects, and that funding has totalled over nearly £70,000, but the total cost of those projects is almost over £500,000. We've also managed to put in £25,000 from the CECF into the Solheim Cup Communities Fund for community groups, and this is about contributing to the Solheim Cup that's coming in September this year to provide sustainable physical environmental improvements.
Much. Can I ask if there are any questions for Bruce? Councillor Barnacle.
Paragraph 1.8 talks about applying for funding. Groups must be constituted with the project supported by local members and also the community council. Can a community council itself apply for this funding?
Bruce, would you like to answer that question?
Certainly, thanks, Councillor Barnacle. If the Community Council is constituted, it can apply for the funding.
We have to be. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Dugan.
Can a community council veto the application?
It can't veto the application, but obviously if it had some issues with the application, we would take that into account during the assessment process.
Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Vice Convener. It's always grand when there are funds to which we can apply and they will grant us money if we, from various sources, come up with match funding. And I know our revenue budget is a challenge, but does the £100,000 that we make available each year, if you like, leave untapped demand, where if we put a bit more in, we could actually leverage even more out of the Scottish Landfill Fund? At this time particularly, if putting a bit more meant we could tap in more, I just wonder whether that would be beneficial. And is there that untapped demand to fill? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know whether Bruce can answer that. Or
Thanks, Councillor Parrott. In the main, the Scottish Landfill Communities Fund can fund a considerable number of projects within the local area. The funding from the CCF funds the administration part that the groups cannot apply for through the Scottish Landfill Communities Fund. So there's usually about a 10 to 15% administration fee that they need to cover, and that's what the Community Environment Challenge Fund is covering for them.
If I may, if that fund had a little bit more in, would we have other projects that could leave even more money out of the landfill fund? Do we have untapped demand of that nature?
It's difficult to say at this stage. At the moment, usually we have hit about the £100,000 sort of limit in terms of the fund. We're always usually there or thereabouts. It's difficult to assess whether or not if we were able to put more in, we would get more out.
Okay.
Okay. No more questions? If there are no more questions, I'm happy to move this report. The Community Environment Challenge Fund allows communities to bid for environmental improvement funding, delivering projects which make a significant difference to their local environment and are widely supported within the community. The fund now supports community groups to leverage additional funding from the Scottish Landfill Communities Fund and improvements to sports pitches and sports ground pavilions. The revised CECF is continuing to fund the development of sustainable community-led environmental improvement projects through an accessible, streamlined, effective assessment and approval process. Therefore, it is recommended that the committee notes the contents of the report and requests the Executive Director to report the outcomes of the Community Environment Challenge Fund for 2019-20 to the committee in 12 months' time. Do I have a seconder for this report? Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm delighted to second this paper. The Community Environment Challenge Fund has assisted many projects that enhance the look and feel of our communities. With personal well-being so high on our priority agenda and mounting evidence that outside space, settings and atmosphere play a significant role in improving individual welfare, it's encouraging to see the range of ventures that are being supported by this fund. It's also significant to mention that the empowerment of our communities that this fund assists with groups from all over Perth and Kinross highlighting the environment projects that are important and unique to their area. I look forward to receiving the report at the next year's committee, and as I say, I'm delighted to second this paper.
Thank you. Councillor Leing. Yes, comments, yes.
I'll be very parochial here. I'm extremely glad to be part of bringing football back to Stanley. I think it really got the community together when they had the first meeting. Attended a meeting with about 40 people from the village of all different ages. It can, even as old as me, can remember when there was football in the village before. And it does bring people together, and I wish them all the success. They've already got 2 teams getting set up and registered for next season, and if it can work as well as at Lunkerty, when you drive past Lunkerty on a Tuesday night and you see 90 kids out in different age groups playing football, it's a fantastic thing to see, and it's what we should be encouraging. This has been a great spend of money in Strathay Ward, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? No? We agree the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Start again. Thank you, Vice Convener. Paper 8 in your document folder. The purpose of this report is to outline options to utilise the additional non-recurring resource of 200,000 allocated in the Council's revenue budget to provide support for retail facade improvements and town centre management initiatives. And I'm going to ask John McCrone if he can introduce the report for us, please.
Thank you, Convener. As you said, the purpose of this report is to indicate how we intend to allocate the 200,000 non-recurrent budget and support that to the benefit of communities. The report has considered and referenced other funding recently made available for improvements within towns throughout Scotland via the Town Centre Capital Fund. The use of local funding would be maximised by prioritising funding assistance towards proposals that have secured match funding from other public or private sources, or in the case of town centre management initiatives that can generate income. Funding should be driven by local community and business proposals based on local needs and opportunities to assist economic growth. It is recommended that funding will be allocated through a grant scheme mechanism aligned with the Community Environmental Challenge Fund, which you have just heard about the success of, to be called the Community and Business Placemaking Fund. This will support applications for assistance to be submitted by businesses and representative business and community bodies. Guidance for the operation of the scheme and criteria to be applied in assessing applications for assistance will assure that help will be given to proposals that have a degree of public or business support within defined localities, have the necessary landlord and regulatory consents in place, demonstrate anticipated community and economic benefits, and maximise funding and community economic benefits. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Williamson, I think, had his hand up first, and then would Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Convener. It's about, we have 9 towns here who look like they're are able to apply for this funding. And I was just wondering, is any work being done on the number of rental properties within those towns? And is there any work being done on owner-occupied? You know, do we have figures around that? My concern is if you rent one of the properties, you could end up facing a higher rent from the owner if you were to end up submitting an application for this fund and doing up the property.
Can I just ask you to clarify? You said right at the start, you said a word that I didn't quite catch. Was it rental properties? Was that the start of your question?
Yeah,
sorry, I misheard.
I was just wondering if there's been any work done on the amount of rental properties, say for example in Pitlochry or Crieff or Dunkeld, and the amount of properties or shops who are owner-occupied within those towns.
Thank you. John, could you take that question, please?
Yes, thanks for the question, Councillor Williamson. yes is the answer. There has been work done in the past, and there's ongoing work done through the vacant eyesore property group and from previous work that was done in relation to heritage schemes in the past. The long and short of it is it will depend on individual circumstances in relation to businesses and where the burden lies within lease conditions for improvements, about whether it rests with the owner or indeed the occupier. And wherever that responsibility lies, they could make the application. In the longer term, it may have an impact on value, but ultimately that would be linked with improved performance. So we need to look at it in individual cases.
Councillor Donaldson, please.
Thank you, Convener. Let me just say I very much want to see this money expended and put to proper use. But can I ask, 1.5, what we actually mean by the comment there, this revenue funding could also support any capital funding through the town centre fund. My point is how. Two, allied to that, is with the town centre management fund, 100,000 was allocated in February 2018, 15 months ago. Not a penny's been spent on that. 100,000 was allocated through the small town retail facades fund, and not a penny's been spent there. It's non-recurring revenue, so there's no one from finance here, but can I just clarify that 200,000 must be spent by 31st of March next year. You can't move it forward yet again because it's non-recurring.
Okay, so that was two questions, John? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the intention has always been, as that the committee has requested, to link it with local community and business representation organisations. So there's been a degree of discussion around how best to pursue that. In terms of the revenue funding, the Town Centre Capital Grant Fund is primarily for larger scale capital related projects, so revenue funding could clearly help support that in certain circumstances. Again, it would need to be looked at in terms of individual detail, but for a large scale project that could include things like design costs or the like. The second part of the question, could you just repeat it to me?
I think Barbara wants to answer that one actually, John. You're off the hook for that particular bit of the question.
I can confirm, Councillor Donaldson, that because of our budget flexibility, sort of arrangements, that if we don't spend all of the money, then, sort of we should be able to flex that forward if it isn't all expended. But I think that the detail that we've had in terms of the micro business fund, sort of, and the use and the quickness with which that has gone, sort of, then we would hope that all of this money would be spent in this financial year.
I just have a follow-up, because in February 2018, 15 months ago, it was stated it was non-recurring. But what we're now being told is it can not just be taken forward into this current financial year, it could be taken further beyond 31st of March 2020.
Sorry, my apologies for not explaining that it's still non-recurring. It's one-off, 2 lots of 100,000.
Yeah.
But the council's arrangements are, sort of, which we've used in other, sort of budget motion monies in the past, going back a number of years, that if we can't spend it all in that, we can use as a service our budget flexibility, so that any underspends in that we can ask, and it would continue, sort of, because to spend it on that. But it is non-recurring, a one-off set of money, but it may go across 2 years, but we would hope that it wouldn't.
Just it's an important point. So it's a non-recurring item, but which in effect can be recurring.
No. Sorry, I'm really not making myself clear.
But it can be taken beyond the end of March next year.
If necessary, using our budget flexibility arrangements. But it is, once the £100,000 is spent for both,
yes.
Sort of, then there is no more money. That's what the non-recurring nature of it means.
But it can't be used to support borrowing and the revenue costs with borrowing.
No, that's not what we're saying in terms of using it for, sort of to support capital projects. What we're saying is there may be some of the projects that come forward through the Town Centre Fund capital funding that might need some additional support that they can't pay for through the capital monies.
Okay, yeah. Right. More consultancy costs, that type of design. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Lane.
Thanks. I think the crux of the question possibly that Councillor Donaldson was getting at, and myself really, is 15 months ago this money was allocated. Not a penny's been spent. Could the officers explain to me why it's taken so long to come up with criteria, etc., on these two funds that would stand up? It seems an inordinate length of time to take 15 months before we're finally getting a way forward.
I think we've had this discussion in, previous committees about, this particular fund and other budget motion monies, because there was a significant number of budget motion, decisions from the budget that was set in February 2018. So officers were working through criteria, for other things. As we were preparing, the criteria, to bring to committee, then we became aware that there was going to be the Town Centre, Scottish Government Fund, and so we delayed bringing this report to make sure that anything that we were going to recommend either didn't cut across or could complement that.
Are there any other questions? In that case, I will move the report. It is recommended the committee approves the expenditure of funding in 2019-20 for retail facade improvements and town centre management initiatives within rural towns through a new scheme to be named the Community and Business Placemaking Fund. The fund will be targeted towards local community and business-led proposals subject to a range of criteria to secure match funding and ensure that best value is achieved and economic benefits maximised. The fund will be promoted to secure participation with representative business and community bodies in rural towns. Excuse me. A report will be brought back to the committee in a year's time detailing the outcomes achieved. Do I have a seconder for this report? Thank you, Councillor McCall. Are there any comments on... Oh, Councillor McCall again. Thank you.
No, I'm enjoying talking today. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to second the paper. The ambition to enhance shops and town centres should be admired, with additional pressures on our current retail provision and falling numbers of people walking through our town centres, as we've already seen in a previous report. It's important now more than ever that we do what we can to help. Utilising the same process as the Community Environment Challenge Funds is a sensible way to proceed, ensuring that the money is correctly delivered to the businesses and town centres that need it the most. In times of reduced funding, it's of utmost importance that money is spent wisely and properly distributed, and to rush the delivery of this money just to appease would be reckless and not for the benefit of the businesses and town centres in our wards. It's surely better to be certain that it is dispersed correctly and that monies are applied where they will do the most good for the people that we're here to represent, and for that reason I'm happy to support the paper.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Apologies. Comments? I see Councillor Dugan and Councillor Lane lining up. Thank you. Councillor Dugan first.
Thank you, Convener. Just to address some of the points in the summing up for the seconder there, it is important to be certain that the money you're allocating to a certain initiative is appropriate. The time to do that is at your budget, not after, certainly not nearly 18 months after your budget. There's a good reason that this has taken so long to bring to well, it's still not doing anything. It's simply a proposal to rebadge it. But there's a reason this hasn't happened, and that is because the original proposal, when it was put forward in your budget, was absurd. And it's absurd now, and it will always remain absurd. Even if things weren't so difficult in a fiscal sense, even if the council's budgets weren't so pressurised, using public funds to maintain private property is, and always will be, absurd. We all want our town centres and our city centre to look as nice as it possibly can be, but that's a shared endeavour with mutual responsibility between the public and private sector. We have an appropriate and very important role to maintain and improve and maximise the utility of the built environment and the public realm, but it never has been and it never will be the responsibility of this or any other local authority to spend public money maintaining private property. That is the responsibility under a full repairing commercial lease of the tenant, and in the event that the property is vacant, it's the responsibility of the property owner, the landlord. This is a ridiculous proposition, and no amount of rebadging is going to change how absurd it is. And I'll say what officers can't say, and that is that it's taken so long to bring anything meaningful forward is because of the level of ridiculous undeliverability that's contained within a proposition that includes spending public money on private property. And I won't be accused of ignoring the need to have the best possible amenity in our public spaces, in our towns and city centres. We have a role to play in that, but it is not when we're making very serious cuts to social care and other elements of council delivery to spend six-figure sums of council money maintaining private properties is a disgrace. And it's easy to see who is maladministering Perth and Kinross Council, the Tories.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dugan. Of course, I'm sure you're not surprised to hear I don't agree with it, but it's entirely your privilege to make that comment. Councillor Ling is next.
Yes, I feel that it is not the best use of money in these stretched times. I'm sure Councillor Reid will agree that we've been involved in correspondence where the people of Auchterarder, I'm sure, would rather have some sort of summer sport camp for their children not being cut, and all the upheaval that's causing to them. And he'll have had a comment from members of the public. I'm sure they would rather have that done than paying a private landlord to paint his shop.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ling. Do we have any other comments? Councillor Reid, surprisingly.
Sorry, thanks, Councillor Ling. You'll be reassured to know that the situation in Auchterarder is slowly but surely resolving itself, and the children will have their summer camp as they expected, and we will deliver that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. As far as I'm aware, these are two new funds set up with this administration, and while it may well have taken somewhat longer to get to this point than we wished, at least we are now here, and I very much welcome this report. I'm sure that communities and businesses throughout Perth and Kinross are waiting to access the Community and Business Placemaking Fund, and especially welcome the extension of the town centre management support to a number of principal towns in Perth and Kinross, including Aberfeldy and Pitlochry in my ward. I'm well aware that the look and feel of town centres matter a lot to local people, and that these funds will help to make our town centres more welcoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Are there any other comments? Okay, I will move. Can we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. I'll hand you back to Vice Convener.
Thank you very much. We now come to the Disabled Persons Parking Places Variation Order. This paper really is just to let us know which ones spaces are no longer needed and the new ones. So are there any questions on this report? Councillor Barnacle.
I just wanted to establish something. I'm involved in a review of a disabled bay in Green Road, Kinross, but I think it was engineered by the Housing Department, so can I assume that this list excludes Housing Department locations?
Thank you, Councillor Barnacle. I don't know that specific location. I'll find out for you. If it's not included in the list, then we haven't been made aware of it, but I'll find out.
I'll talk to you afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions in this report? In that case, I shall move this report.
Happy to second, Vice Convener.
Okay, thank you. Green paper, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Vice Conveners. That takes us on to paper number 10. This is a report recommending our approval of a Section 11 exemption order to facilitate the Solheim Cup at Gleneagles Hotel. And I will ask Keith to introduce the report and take questions.
Thank you very much, Convener. Perth and Kinross has a strong reputation for hosting large-scale international events. Perhaps one of the most significant ones was the Ryder Cup in 2014, which was hosted at Gleneagles and was an opportunity to showcase Perth and Kinross across the world. We're looking forward to another event in September of this year. The Solheim Cup again is a major international sporting event and the largest event in women's golf. It takes place between the 9th and 15th of September. This report is about seeking approval for an exemption from rights of access for a temporary period to support the delivery of the Solheim Cup. It's concerned with the safety and security both before the event in terms of building the event site, but also during the event to protect public, to protect potential visitors and also potentially high-profile individuals who may be present at the event. The exclusions also allow the event to make a charge, which is a part of the activity. Removing rights of access is not something we take lightly. We've already heard this afternoon about the importance of walking, cycling, etc. within Perth and Kinross, and hence there's a very detailed process associated with this, including detailed consultations, and the actual confirmation for an exemption of the length of this time is actually made by the Scottish Ministers. There have been extensive consultations by colleagues around the proposals within this report. No objections have been received, and we're looking forward to welcoming the Solheim Cup, and we ask that you support this paper, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Keith. Are there any questions on this report? Okay. In the absence of any questions, I will move the report. The Solheim Cup is the most significant event in women's golf and one of the most prestigious women's sporting events in the world. The event will be televised to a worldwide audience by more than 40 broadcasters. Globally, the TV coverage will reach over 600 million people. More than 100,000 spectators are expected to converge on Glen Eagles over the course of the event, including people whose public profile or status may require additional security. This internationally significant event involves a considerable amount of planning to ensure its safe and successful delivery. By approving this report, the Council will be ensuring protection of the event site by allowing exemption of certain surrounding areas from public access. This protects the security of the event as well as the health and safety of the public. Can I have a seconder for this report, please?
Happy to second the report, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Can we agree this paper? Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Apologies, I jumped ahead of myself once again. Comments on the paper. Apologies.
Okay, thank you, Convener. This Council seems to effortlessly produce not only our own events, but the events coming into Perth and Kinross, like the Solheim Cup. I was a resident in Auchterarder when the Ryder Cup was hosted at Glen Eagles, and this worldwide sporting spectacular went ahead with no transport disruption to any of the local residents prior, during and post the event. So, Convener, as you've stated, most of the work gets done well in advance of said occurrence, and it's therefore important to highlight the excellent work done by the Council officers to blend the needs of our residents and to increase the visitors and economic impact to local communities that these events bring, and I think our thanks should be noted.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Are there any other comments on this paper? In that case, I'll hand you back to Vice Convener.
Thank you very much. We now come to the amendment list of public roads. I'm just going to move this report. Don't think there'll be any comments.
Happy to second.
Okay, thank you. No comments on this report? Thank you very much. Now, before we leave today, I have a very pleasant duty. It seems to be my role at the moment to do the valedictories. I don't know if you're all aware, but this will be the last meeting for Bruce Reekie. Bruce Reekie joined this council not long after I joined it, so maybe I'll get out sometime too. Careful what you wish for, it. Already been once. It is with some sadness I have to advise that Bruce Reekie's last Environment Committee, as Bruce will be leaving us at the end of this month for a promoted post in Stirling Council. Bruce started with the Council in 2000 as the Environmental Strategy Officer. After a short spell working with SEPA, he was attracted back to the Council in 2003 to become the Council's Waste Plan Coordinator, a post that was at the heart of leading the transformation of the public's approach to recycling in Perth and Kinross. Bruce's good work was rewarded with his appointment to the Waste Service Manager. Bruce, maybe you should be standing up instead of sitting there, and come out here, yes. Thank you. Bruce's good work was rewarded with his appointment to the Waste Services Manager post in 2008, and he was subsequently entrusted with portfolio of community green space when the manager for that activity retired. Bruce can reflect on being instrumental in many achievements during his time with the Council, and here are just some examples. an increased household recycling rate from 19% to the current level of 53%. His team turned around the commercial waste service, increasing the annual income levels from 800,000 to 1.1 million. The waste services and community green space teams have won multiple awards at Scottish and UK level, as well as several councils securing the future awards. Bruce's keen sense of partnership working has led to strong relationships with local community groups. Evidence of this can be seen from the vibrancy of many local environmental groups, and in particular in Bloom groups, as well as his work developing social enterprise such as the bike station and shared multiple agency working at Westbank. Bruce has a warm and outgoing personality, is an honest and highly motivated and trustworthy officer who is fully committed to his work and therefore a pleasure to work with. Stirling's council gain is our loss, but at least he's not too far away for some future shared working between our councils. Bruce, thanks for everything you've done for your colleagues, for elected members, and more importantly, for the people of Perth and Kinross. I'm sure everyone here joins me in wishing you all the best in your new role.
Very embarrassed as well. I think it's fair enough to say as well. And thank you, Kathleen, for the very kind words. It's very much appreciated. I really just wanted to take this opportunity to thank committee members, both past and present, for the support over the years. It's been absolutely tremendous. And I think the partnership approach that we've had between officers, elected members and our communities has made great progress, and we've been able to deliver some really engaging and innovative projects over the time we've had here. I recognise very much that some of the decisions that we put before you as committee members are not easy, and the opportunity to discuss, debate them with you is always welcome. And I think very much we always appreciate the backing we've received in terms of some of those tough decisions that you've had to take here at committee. The Waste Services and Community Green Space team have and will continue to work with the communities to deliver projects that not only protect but also enhance our environment going forward. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with such enthusiastic and dedicated people, not only within the Waste Services and Community Green Space team, but within the wider Housing and Environment team, and obviously the Council as well. And I think just finally to say, I think our ambition very much matched with your commitment in delivering with communities is a powerful partnership, and that will stand us in good stead going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. That brings today's committee meeting to a close. Thank you all for your attendance, your questions and your comments.